Dear students, in this video, I'm going to teach you how to conjugate a verb in subjunctive tense. How to conjugate a verb in subjunctive tense. First of all, let's check out how to get the subjunctive stem and what are the subjunctive endings. How to get the subjunctive stem and what are the subjunctive endings. So let's check out the rule. To get the subjunctive stem, first step, we need to go to the ILS form of the present tense. So what's the first step? We need to know the ILS form, third person plural, ILS form of the present tense. And then we need to remove the ending ENT when a verb ends with when a verb is conjugated in present tense for this subject pronoun ILS, a verb will end with ENT. Now we need to remove the ending ENT and then you will get the subjunctive stem. Now what are the subjunctive endings? The subjunctive endings are, for je it is E, for tu ES, for il and LE, for nous IONS, for vous IEZ, for ILS and ELES it is ENT. Did you notice, my friends? For je and tu and il and L and ILS and ELES, the ending it's E, ES, E, ENT. They look like present tense endings. Regular ER verb, present tense ending. For NOUS and VOUS, IONS and IEZ, they look like imparfait endings. Remember, the endings for subjunctive, for nous and vous, the endings look like imparfait endings. For nous, IONS, for vous, IEZ. But for all the other subject pronouns, the endings are like the regular ER verb present tense endings. So I hope you know how to get the subjunctive stem. What's the rule? We need to go to the ILS of the present tense and remove ENT. You'll get the subjunctive stem. What's the rule? What are the subjunctive endings? For je, it is E. For tu, it is ES. For il and L, it is E. For nous, IONS. For vous, IEZ. For ILS and for ELES, it's ENT. So I hope you got how to get the subjunctive stem and what are the subjunctive endings. Now let me explain to you, let me give an example and explain to you the translation. What could be the translation and when a verb is conjugated in subjunctive tense? So here we have a sentence in French. Les jeunes souhaitent que leurs parents les comprennent. Les jeunes souhaitent que leurs parents les comprennent. Now, can you see the verb comprendre? It's conjugated in subjunctive tense. We have got the stem by going to the new form of the the ILS form of the present tense, and we have removed ENT. And when the subject is parents, it is something like they ILS. So again, we need to put ENT. So the subjunctive ending and the present tense ending, they look the same. But can you see, when we use a subjunctive, whenever a sentence starts with an expression that talks about a desire, a preference, a necessity, then if you find a verb after those expressions, then we need to use those verbs in subjunctive tense. So here we see there's an expression. The sentence starts with an expression that talks about a desire, a wish. The young people wish that their parents might understand them. The young people wish that their parents might understand them. So please remember, subjunctive is always used after an expression that talks about desire, wish, necessity, emotion. So we're going to see when we're going to use a verb in subjunctive. The title I've given is On utilise le subjonctif, we use subjunctive tense après les verbes ou les expressions qui expriment, after the verbs or the expressions which express. Number one. So I told you a subjunctive is used after a verb or an expression that talks about a desire, un désir, une préférence, a preference, an ordre, an order. So whenever you find an expression or a verb that talks about desire or preference and order, and after that if you find a verb, and that verb should be in subjunctive tense. Now let me give you some examples of those expressions that talk about desire or preference or order. So, je veux que. The expression always ends with the word que. The translation for que is that. So what is je veux que? I wish that. Je désire que. I desire that. Je souhaite que. I wish that. Je préfère que. I prefer that. Je exige que. I insist that. So whenever an expression starts with any of these expressions, a sentence starts with any of these expressions, and after this expression, if you find a verb, that verb should be in which tense? Subjunctive tense. I repeat, whenever a sentence starts with an expression that talks about desire or preference or an order, and if you find a verb after these expressions, that verb should be in subjunctive. Let me give an example. Le maître veut que nous soyons à l'heure. Can you see the sentence starts with expression, the teacher wants that, the teacher wishes that. And can you see another verb after this expression? This verb is être, and this verb should be conjugated in subjunctive tense, because it's placed after an expression that talks about wish. The teacher wishes that we might be on time. We might be on time. There are some exceptions. The general rule is here, but in the next video, in the next portion, I'll be explaining to you some exceptions. So here, I hope you've understood, whenever a verb is placed after an expression that talks about wish or preference or an order, and then that verb should be in subjunctive tense. Next one, if an expression that it talks about an emotion like fear or regret, like these expressions like je suis content que, I'm content that, je suis triste que, I'm sad that, je suis heureux que, I'm happy that, je suis désolé que, I'm sad that, je suis étonné que, I'm surprised that, je suis surprise que, I'm surprised that. And after these expressions, if you find a verb, that verb should be in subjunctive. For example, the expressions like je regrette que, j'ai peur que, c'est dommage que. What is je regrette que? I regret that. J'ai peur que, I'm afraid that. C'est dommage que, it's a pity that. For example, elle a peur qu'il pleuve. Can you see the verb pleuvoir? It's conjugated in subjunctive tense because it is placed after an expression that talks about an emotion. She is afraid that it might rain. Another example, le besoin ou la nécessité. When an expression talks about a need or a necessity, for example, il faut que, it's necessary that. Il est nécessaire que, it is necessary that. Il est indispensable que, it is essential that. So whenever you find an expression that talks about necessity or need, and after that if you find a verb, that verb should be in subjunctive. For example, il faut que tu finisses le devoir. It's necessary that you might finish the homework. The last part. Whenever you find an expression that talks about doubt, uncertainty, possibility, for example, je doute que, I doubt that. Il est possible que, it's possible that. And after these expressions that talk about doubt, uncertainty, then we will use the verb in subjunctive. Je doute que mon voisin vende sa voiture. I doubt that my neighbor might sell his car. So I hope you've understood how to get the subjunctive stem and what are the subjunctive endings, and you know when to use subjunctive tense. It's always placed after an expression that talk about desire, preference, order, emotion, need, necessity, doubt, uncertainty, and possibility. Now we're going to see some irregular subjunctive conjugation. You know the general rule how to get the stem. Go to the ILS of the present tense, remove ENT. You know what are the subjunctive endings? For je, it is E. For tu, ES. For il and LE. For nu, IONS. For vous, IEZ. For ILS and ELES, it is ENT. You know the general rule to get the subjunctive stem, and you know the general rule and to get the subjunctive endings. But there are some exceptions. For certain verbs, we need to by heart the irregular subjunctive conjugation. For example, the verb être, it is que je sois. See, this que is part of the first expression, that I might be. Que tu sois, that you might be. Can you see a special spelling? You can't go with the general rule. Go to the ILS of être and remove ENT. If you go to ILS of être present tense is what? It is SONT. You don't have an ENT to remove. That's the reason we have an irregular subjunctive conjugation for être. So, qu'il soit, that he might be, que nous soyons, that we might be, que vous soyez, that you might be, qu'il soit, that they might be. So this is what you need to remember when you want to conjugate a verb in subjunctive. This verb être in subjunctive. Let's check out for avoir. It is que j'aille, que tu aies, qu'il ait, que nous ayons, que vous ayez, qu'ils aient. So that I might have, that you might have, that he might have. Same way for savoir, it is que je sache, que tu saches, qu'il sache, que nous sachions, que vous sachiez, qu'il sache. And for the verb vouloir, it is que je veuille, que tu veuilles, qu'il veuille, que nous voulions, que vous vouliez, qu'il veuille. Next verb is aller. Que j'aille, que tu ailles, qu'il aille, que nous allions, que vous alliez, qu'ils aillent. Same way for verb valoir, to know the worth. Que je vaille, que tu vailles, qu'il vaille, que nous valions, que vous valiez, qu'il vaille. The same way for this verb faire, que je fasse, que tu fasses, qu'il fasse, que nous fassions, que vous fassiez, qu'il fasse. Even for this verb pouvoir, que je puisse, que tu puisses, qu'il puisse, que nous puissions, que vous puissiez, qu'il puisse. So for certain verbs, for these verbs, you have an irregular subjunctive conjugation. The remaining verbs, you can go with the general rule, but these verbs we need to by heart. I hope you've understood. Please go through this video several times and you'll be able to understand how to conjugate a verb in subjunctive tense. Thank you.